Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. In this two-part series, we sit down to talk about Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing and how they're helping to improve the public safety aviation industry. Joining us for this conversation is Tony Weller, the Director of Sales and Marketing for AEM, and Sean Rickards, the Chief Pilot and Director of Operations for Yellowhead Helicopters. Tony Weller's been with AEM for over 7 years. Tony also spent many years working in the education field as a teacher and head of department, with positions in Australia, the UK, and Canada. Sean Rickards is a professional pilot with over 30 years of experience and over 10,000 flight hours. In 2001, Sean joined Yellowhead Helicopters as a base manager, and within a few years earned the position of regional manager for Yellowhead Helicopters Northern Operations. In 2014, Sean was appointed as the Director of Operations for Yellowhead Helicopters. During his tenure, he played a pivotal role in guiding the company through a significant period of growth as the company expanded to over 40 aircraft. His passion for aviation, dedication to safety, and ability to navigate complex operations have firmly established him as a respected figure in the helicopter industry. Yellowhead Helicopters is a privately held Canadian company that has been providing commercial helicopter solutions to the public, industry, and government since 1975. From helicopter bases strategically located throughout British Columbia and Alberta, they have a wide mission set that includes aerial firefighting, utility work, and tourism, including heliskiing. For more than a decade, Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing, also known as AEM, has provided customer-driven solutions to the aviation industry with the design, development, and manufacture of avionics. They're an approved OEM supplier of aircraft components to several helicopter OEMs, such as Bell, Boeing, Leonardo, Airbus Helicopters, and Sikorsky. This is a very interesting conversation that highlights AEM's commitment to developing outstanding mission equipment with the input of the end user.
Welcome to the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Join your host, John Gray, Jeff Ratkovich, and Jack Shanley.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like they're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, threw the shotgun, threw something out, grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
4 on the stop. You're in custody. You're advising code 4 on the stop.
When it comes to R&D, obviously there's a lot of different companies out there that are doing R&D, and they're doing it in helicopters. I can only relate it to the FAA, but obviously there's always a lot of red tape when you're putting things in helicopters. I'm going through it right now with a 135 that we're bringing in from Europe. It has a 650 and a 750 in it, Garmin GPSs, but it's this big funny thing that EASA is not recognized and blah, blah, blah. So we're having to go a field approval route. I kind of just sitting here curious as we're talking, like, what is the red tape involved in putting a piece of equipment in a helicopter that's maybe still under R&D? Is there a lot of hurdles to jump through, Sean and Tony, on your end?
Tony's probably the better one to answer that. We just buy it and stick it in our aircraft as long as it has the STC for it.
Pretty simple for you guys.
Yeah. So I'd say all the testing that was done with Yellowhead was done on the ground. So we create it's called a not for flight model, or a red label version of the product. So you can physically install it in the aircraft and connect it up to power and whatnot, and operate it, but the aircraft's not allowed to take off. So you'll do a not for flight version, and then we'll do a safety of flight version, which is basically the minimum environmental qualification testing completed and approved, so that it's able to safely be installed in an aircraft. And basically you're running vibration and some shock analysis and some general EMI interference, just to make sure it's not going to send everything haywire on the aircraft. And then to make it the full approved installation. Once again, you mentioned the field approval. That'll be a common route that can take place. And then the other preferred version is a supplemental type certificate, an STC. The magic piece of paper that automatically gets it on there. That's the dream. So we've recognized obviously the power of that over the years with our products and systems. So we're working through the STC process as well for this product to help support Yellowhead and the rest of our customers as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's just there's so much I can imagine when you're going through an R&D on something like that. It's just the red tape involved. So it sounds like it's not too bad. But yeah, I definitely agree. Like the STC route obviously seems to be probably the preferred venue, but it is nice to be able to get the field approvals and things like that. So
yeah, and I think it's a pretty common route within the FAA jurisdiction is to run that field approval route. Obviously, you got to do your own paperwork still. There's still paperwork to do, and and the level of documentation that we provide on the products certainly helps people kind of ease their workload and improve the chance of it being accepted by their FAA representative. But you know what? These checks and balances exist for a reason, right? Whether it's the FAA, Transport Canada, EASA, every one of them has got their own kind of little quirks and challenges that you have to deal with, but it's there for a reason. There's a kind of common saying that like a lot of these rules and regulations are written in blood, right? So there's a reason why we do this. There's a reason why we do all of this testing and research on our end to make sure it passes the qualification, because the end result is not, in a car, something goes wrong, you can kind of just pull off the side of the road or run up against the guardrail and everyone's okay. They don't make big enough airbags for aircraft yet. So we're,
there's there are parachutes on airplanes now. So that's a thing.
Something I wanted to throw out regarding the comms, and Tony touched on it, and I think Sean will agree with this. When you get on a large fire, I like to call it controlled chaos with the comms. We have 4 different radios going. Air attacks talking to me. The IC on the ground's talking to me. My Helitac crew is talking to me for their water drops and where they want it. So you got 4 different radios going, and comms can become a weak link on a fire. And it becomes a safety issue too. So having comms that work and they work right and somewhat easy for us pilots to be able to program and know how to navigate around it is huge. You got guys that come on the fire and their comms go bad. You're now having to go land and you're not making any money. So comms and having it right is crucial on a fire. And I'm sure Sean will agree with that.
Yeah, that'll get you kicked off the fire right away. If your radio ain't working, you're not going airborne, and they'll release you right away. So,
well, that could be the best case scenario too, right? I mean, it's dangerous to not have that communication. Yeah. I'm sure it's a bee's nest, right, with all the different aircraft and everything.
Yeah, Tony touched on it. We're down at 50 feet. We're in the smoke. We're in the trees. We're in the wire environment. We're calling on and off our drops, calling on and off our water dips. And when you're in the smoke and you got 6 helicopters going, you have to know where every helicopter that's ahead of you, you have to know where he's at. And if comms are going bad, you're not going IFR, but when you're going into the smoke and the guy ahead of you, you're trusting that he's doing what he's supposed to be doing and making left traffic, and all of a sudden he makes right traffic and he's not talking to anybody anymore. That becomes a safety issue if you can't talk to everybody.
Sean, up until this point, have you guys done something like this in the past where you're helping with a kind of a different, third non-Yellowhead manufacturer of doing an R&D, or is this kind of a first type of this relationship for Yellowhead?
No, not the first, but first in the avionics side of things. But we've done some work with other DARs on getting some parts certified and particle separators and other attachments to the aircraft. We have worked on that over the years. But yeah, first time for the avionics side, which was refreshing.
Yeah, and how cool for you guys to be able to kind of create a product that that you guys like, and obviously with your vast experience, a product that you like is most likely an acceptable product for the rest of the industry, right? So I think that's probably really valuable for AEM and kind of neat. I think it speaks to AEM too, and of being able to take the feedback, because again, like you said, Tony, engineers may have one idea, but in practicality, does it make sense, or is that how it works in the aircraft? And it's nice as getting the pilot side that, hey, why don't we do it this way or look at it this way? So I'm sure that's been a really good partnership for you guys both.
Absolutely, yeah. It's great to be able to have that input, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Sean, for you, I go back to my early adulthood years and working for the U.S. Forest Service as a firefighter. I was always enamored by aerial firefighting. Seeing helicopters come in and drop water on the fire was always really cool. And being a pilot now, I look at the challenges that exist in the environment that Tony described that you guys are flying in, and it seems really challenging. Looking at all the different things you've done over the course of your career, can you talk about some of the challenges that exist for you as a fire pilot? Anytime I say fire pilot, it sounds like fighter pilot. But as a fire pilot, that don't exist in some of the other roles that you've flown in.
For sure. I mean, really, that just complex environment, as T1 was saying there, we're not often in a wire environment unless it's an interface fire, which we're getting more and more of in Canada now. But, where I am, a lot of it is resource protection and such, and some structure protection. But it's definitely just a complex environment. We could have, say, 5, 6, 10 machines on a fire, and knowing where everybody is in the smoke. And they're typically longer days, your 12, 14-hour duty days. And again, in Canada, they've allowed fire to stay under the old regulations. So a pilot could be out there for 30-plus days on a fire. So
I can't imagine 30-plus days.
Oh, legally, they're allowed to go 42 days and fly 150 hours a month in under our regulations of 702. And the government had changed it, like I said, recently, and reclassified our 703, which are our passenger moving type thing, but allowed fires to stay in that. So it was unfortunate. That should have been put under the new regulations. And a lot of the other stuff that we do, like some pipeline patrols and, in the middle of nowhere, and some construction projects that we do, could be still maybe longer days. We all agree. And Yellowhead hasn't been, I haven't personally run 42-day stretches since the 90s, but not very many companies have done that. And, but a 30-day wasn't all that unheard of, especially on fires. So yeah, complex environments, a lot of things going on, and chatter. Some of the nicest jobs you're on is when you're off in the middle of nowhere and all you hear is that 747 flying over once every bunch of hours and calling some call to Tokyo or something like that, and you hear the birds chirping and there's nobody on, but you can still go fly 8 hours a day moving a drill or something. Those are the nice ones. But yeah, you get on these, and I got a lot of pilots that just don't really want to do fires because of that. It's just so much going on, and they'd rather just go somewhere and park themselves on one project and fly there however many hours they can.
How physically taxing is it to fly an active fire? I mean, I feel like obviously very mentally you're into and you're going, but also you're looking down, you're moving a lot. It's kind of an uncomfortable position. I feel like it's mentally and probably physically draining. Does it seem like your body kind of like almost gets better at it as you fight fire longer and longer?
I think your back gets used to that S curve in it as you're bent over side if you're doing external load work. I mean, I've done a lot of bucketing in my years and a lot of back burning. Actually, did a lot of drip torching over the years in certain areas. So yeah, it's sorry. I remember reading an article here a while ago. I think it was done by the military in the U.S. there, that an 8-hour day of external load work is equal to about a 40-hour work week for most people. So, and I don't doubt that. Some jobs are quite easy if you're doing just repetitive motions and you get into a groove, but with that complex environment, and it's just hot, it's smoky, it's dry, a lot of aircraft, a lot of chatter going on the radio. It's not just you and another aircraft, you're talking air to air. It's, like Tony said, you got the ground crews yakking at each other and then calling other aircraft, calling you. There's a lot to keep in track. And I've done a lot of admin work too, working with the fire bosses and flying left-hand turns around the fire and just coordinating the radios for making sure that they get what they need in the cockpit, right? And yeah, it's just taxing for sure. There's definitely a lot easier jobs than helicopters.
You brought up the flying the drip torch. That was one of my favorite assignments on the ground, was getting to run that drip torch. Can you talk about your experience applying that from an aerial perspective?
0 to 0 in about 32 seconds. Yeah, you go really good one day, and then the next day it's holy crap, it's escaping, and I dripped a little bit over here by accident. But no, it's I started back again in the 90s with. They used to do a lot of broadcast burning here on, say, old logging projects. They would burn off all the timber. So you would start there in your early career. Whereas you're at a point now in British Columbia where it's quite a useful tool in certain areas, for sure, aerial drip torching as well as ground-based drip torching. Not applicable in every spot. But it's gotten to the point now that a lot of guys like myself just start doing it. And so we've started a program. We're working with the BC Forest Service here to try to help generate. So I might go out this summer with a young pilot and just go and mentor them and show them what the ropes as much as I know. a lot of it is an art. I mean, you go out there and you're looking at the winds and working directly with the fire boss or the incident commander at the time and looking at what they want to achieve out of that. But definitely an effective way to do it, and a lot of fun lighting fires until it escapes on you, and then you got to throw your bucket on. And done that a few times too, where you go and you torch for about an hour or two, and then it's like, whoop, shoot, and they call you to throw your bucket on, and off you go.
Good job, security. Like you're creating the fire for yourself there, Sean. I see what you're doing, pal.
Absolutely.
I see what you're doing.
Yeah, a little overachievement there. We used to call that when we were burning off blocks in the fall, because they do that in the fall months, right, to burn off these broadcast burns, and you a bit of an overachievement when you burnt the forest above the block or something like that. But like that, of course, you're in the fall, so it'd go out eventually. Never do that in the summer months.
There's so much urban interface in Southern California. You don't see, or at least I haven't seen that application very much. Tony Weber, have you seen that from your side?
Just down here in San Diego, I've seen the ping pong ball machine. I think it's the same thing where it kind of lights it as it goes over the side. But I think the drip torch may be more common up there in Canada.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's the Dragon Balls are the AIDS machines, we call them up here, the aviation ignition device, or aerial ignition device, sorry. They're a little better for ground-based fires, like a lot of grass fires. When we've got heavy timber up here in some places, and you need to get that fire up into that timber for it to actually get a good light off. And I mean, I've lit 10,000 hectare chunks of land sometime, and it's just an amazing thing when you kind of peel off and you look at what you've done, and you've got this massive rank 6 fire burning up to a fire guard, and you're like, wow, I hope they put that out. I did that, and I hope they put it out by the time it hits there.
Yeah, this last summer, I recall all the news headlines, seeing all the photos of the smoke that was coming out of Canada, drifting in the United States. It sounded like you guys had a pretty epic fire season. I know you talked about you guys were committed to other jobs, but can you talk about some of the dynamics that went into the last fire season and kind of what created that?
Well, we're currently in a lot of parts of BC, I think in the Okanagan there too, Tony, is in drought. Very little moisture. We came into early summer with just no moisture on the ground, no usual rainfall that we've had, and that continued right through the summer and to this day. So we right now are currently expecting another exciting fire season. So that's part of it for sure. Well, a huge part of it for the most part. So, and the El Nino that's happening, so different weather cycles that are happening. We watch that over the season here and how the ocean temperatures are and what's happening in Australia, what's happening in California, and we try to extrapolate how busy our season's going to be here, and then how many helicopters we bid on different jobs and what we keep in place for firework.
Has Canada come up with some solutions to bring in more resources when needed? It seemed like there was a huge need for resources that couldn't be filled. As far as from an aerial standpoint.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can bring in out-of-country operators under emergency services. I think it gets to a point, though, where in this last year in particular, with a number of provinces on fire, like I said earlier, with 1 or 2 provinces are on fire, the Canadian industry can mostly handle it. Helicopter industry can mostly handle it. They may need more ground help and all that, but you get 3 provinces burning, or 4 like it was last summer, and yes, it's extreme. We had, New Brunswick. I've never had New Brunswick phone me to look to see if a helicopter. They were ready to pay for a helicopter to come across Canada, and that's might as well fly to Mexico. It's as far, if it's actually shorter, probably to fly to Mexico than it is over to New Brunswick from Prince George, BC. So yeah, it was a pretty large fire season across the whole country, which really put a drain on resources. So yes, the governments themselves, of course we don't organize that, and we'd love to be able to supply helicopters to everything they need, but so they bring in the extra resources as needed through unilateral agreements with other countries. We have Mexican, we had South African firefighters. I've got a really good video of one of my pilots with the whole South African crew, and of course they're making more in a day here in Canada on a fire than they would make in a whole month back at home, right? So they were just absolutely overjoyed. They're singing every day and going to work. He had some really good videos of work, and hardest working crew he's probably ever had on a fire, right?
That's cool.
I had to zip back down to Australia for some family stuff last July, and there I think probably half of that 787 were Aussie firefighters returning back home. Would be on the ground here. Yeah.
It's interesting. You get some of these out of country ones, like especially the Australian ones. We do get them up here in Mexican, and of course we have quite a different fire up in northern British Columbia. I mean, Kelowna is probably similar with its dryness and more space between the trees, but you get up here and you're sometimes in 200-foot tall timber, and so these Australian firefighters never seen anything like that, right? But everybody knows what they're doing, and they just get into program. And I think we've got a really good structure within British Columbia anyway of bringing those crews in and getting them into a place where they can work and be effective.
Yeah, it's crazy when you talk about trees that height. In my experience in Southern California was a lot different. And Tony's is probably similar. You're dealing with chaparral and manzanita a lot of the time. A lot of desert type fuels in the ground as opposed to the heavy timber. Yeah, it burns fast and hot, but nighttime comes and typically the next day the fire's it's just about out by itself. The overnight relative humidity goes up and then you're done. Whereas you guys, it doesn't happen like that. A little different.
That's for sure. And even this year, because of the drought conditions, fires driven by wind or fuel. And in these cases, you were getting rank 6, the highest rating of fire in late at night, in the middle of the night. Fires were running 23, 30 kilometers. So, again, we're in a very sparsely settled area. For the most part, we've got population centers, but, the largest fire in BC's history was like 600,000 hectares, if memory serves, and mostly an unsettled area, some small communities, and people had to be evacuated. It wasn't like it was encroaching on large cities and homes and that, but it's still massive fire, and it's got to be controlled. Up there, there's northeastern BC, there's a lot of oil assets and that kind of thing. So that was important for them to obviously protect the gas wells and other structures that were up there for resources.
Hey, Sean, I do want to switch gears just a little bit. A lot of my listening audience is in their flight training, or they're just finishing their flight training, trying to figure out what they want to do for their career. A lot of them want to kind of go that utility fire route. One of the things that we consistently touch on my podcast is it's like attitude. Attitude can get you a job almost everywhere. Attitude is maybe more important than like your stick skills. So that aside, attitude, very important. What would be some tips that you would give to young men and women that are just getting into the industry, that are interested in getting into utility? What is maybe a pathway that they could kind of follow to get them to positions that are with good, reputable companies, decent salary, and flying cool missions?
I think you got to do your research and you got to be willing to do everything else first. You're not going to come out of, I'm sure you can understand, not going to come out of flight school as a utility pilot. I mean, even to get on fires in BC, it's 500 hours and you need a mountain course, some experience. And then they still start you off on the lowest levels of doing admin type work and reconnaissance. And then eventually as you get known. So, getting a company, I think, that is diverse, has a lot of different things they do. You can go to a utility company as a low time pilot, but it'd be, unless you're absolutely stellar or have some natural skill sets, it's going to take a same amount of time, I think, or longer, and they might not get that point. But a company that has a broad client base with a lot of different work. I mean, I take low time pilots here. We generate a number of low time pilots actually, and we can go tree planting with them, and that's just slinging boxes of trees out, and that just gets that repetition. They got to get out there and actually fly to get good at it. And then there's truly our naturals. I mean, there's some people that can do, they're average longliners and they can throw boxes around, and then there's others that can set a drill on a 4 posts and do it without anybody looking or anybody helping. So there's some natural ability, and some people that, I've had a number of pilots over my managing career that they want to be that pilot. I'm like, I'm sorry, you never will be. We'll train you as much as we can, and you're going to be a great pilot, and you're safe, and you'll be able to get that load into that guy's hands every time. But doing that job, probably not. Setting marker balls on a power line or class D'ing a worker insertion might not be in your cards. So some people have to be realistic, but getting somewhere that has, there's history of movement of low-time pilots, has a great diversity of work that allows us to put low-time pilots. Like if a utility environment, if all we did is utility work, I need a 2,000-hour pilot with, 500 hours of external load time. That's going to be hard to get when you're working in that company, unless you come to, say, Yellowhead, where we do base work, and I could throw you out in some tree planting, and throw you in some forestry work, and let you build those repetitions up. I think that's I've seen that over my career. I said, I caught the tail end of it, I think, in the late 90s, where it was not hard to fly a lot of hours. If you wanted to work 42 days straight, you could go out and do it and fly all those days. Our highest time pilots now are, our yearly average is probably 400 to 600 hours, maybe, right? On 600 hours on one or two jobs, but the rest are around 400. So even our high time pilots aren't getting the same repetitions that they used to. So this is going to take a little bit longer, but trying to find something that has some diversity in their company that gives the opportunity for a low time pilot, and definitely attitude. we can train a lot of pilots, but everyone that comes across my desk, it's, your personality is what I look for first. And then I like to see if you've done some equipment operating in the past. If you're a farm kid that's ran some equipment, you probably got some good hands and feet. And maybe we'll be able to make some money. But definitely personality is a big part of work ethic and personality.
And is it still kind of the same premise? I know when I was going through flight school, Canada and the United States does it like a little bit differently. Traditionally in the United States, civilian route, like what I went, do your commercial, and then you do your flight instructor. And your first gig is typically becoming a CFI, which is a little silly. It's like blind leading the blind. Somehow it works. There's not that many accidents to actually support that it's a bad way to do it. It's just a silly way to do it, even though it's the way that I went. Is it still kind of different in Canada where it's like you get your commercial and then you're going and you're working, like you're finding those entry level positions in helicopter operations?
It's gone a lot. It wasn't like that in the past. When I did my license, and I think a lot of people coming through my era did it, you usually had off-season pilots that were highly experienced doing training because there wasn't much to do in the winter months. So you went to a training school and you did some training and made some money, unless you had a winter skill or something, heli skiing at the time. But so I think training back in the 90s and early 2000s and before that, we had better training, to be honest. I mean, like you say, it's blind leading the blind. You're seeing that more in Canada now because it's harder and harder for young pilots to get jobs. I found the average in the past is about 3 years. If you were hard at it and you wanted that job in Canada, you would be flying probably regularly and within 3 years. Up and now you're 5 to 6, 7 years sometimes before you kind of getting that opportunity. You're working on ground crews. So yeah, it's so you're now seeing some more pilots that are going to get their class 4 instructor, to become instructor, just to build the hours. To be honest, when I see those kind of resumes come through, you're really a 100-hour pilot. You have not a lot of experience at that point. You've got lots of hours, but no real world experience yet. And, I've got a 400-hour pilot, and I used to use this example when we were doing our, because in oil and gas too, that's one of the things that really hurt our industry is the oil and gas in this country. They brought in a lot of standards, which is great, and put competency based on the hours that you had, which is an unfortunate way of doing it. Green carding is a way to go, or carding someone, make sure they know what they're doing. So putting an hour level of 1,000 or 1,500 hours on pilots that used to be able to put them in there at 200 hours, and they can go out in there and fly. I would take a 400-hour pilot that I've developed here through some forestry flying and mentorship, and I would much rather have that than a 1,000-hour instructor pilot. But we are seeing more of that in Canada, and unfortunately, I think it's just due to the fact that it's hard to get jobs, and we're seeing more of an attrition of these older, experienced pilots that aren't getting into training or doing winter training, because there's also more winter work for these more experienced pilots.
It's interesting to hear that it's starting to shift, and I don't think that's for the better, personally. I mean, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I was a flight instructor. I became a better pilot in that environment. But then you go to the real world and you're like, okay, yeah, this is completely freaking different, right? And so, I think being able to have an experienced guy come in the cockpit with you and teach you is very. I got really lucky. I had an instructor that was like that. He came with all this experience from real world flying, and it helps really create a well-rounded pilot. So it's interesting to hear that that's kind of changing, though.
Yeah, slowly. I think we still have some really good flight schools with strong base of good high time pilots, but I am seeing more, and I'm actually entertaining hiring a fellow here maybe this summer to do a bit of flying with us just for a few months. That is that's what he's been doing, and he's about 600-700 hours of instructing. But when I did my license, kind of the tail end after you'd learned everything, and the basics can be taught to any pilot, and that's what these young pilots are doing, going in and becoming instructors. They're teaching the basics on how to fly, and that's great. But when you can learn that, and if you got a bit extra time and you can go land on pads underneath power lines and take you into real confined areas that you do in the real world with a pilot that has done it, then you can go out and when you actually get that first job and show the chief pilot that you're not scared to land in this, or that you can do this, or you have this understanding of it, sure helps for sure.
Before we wrap up, just a couple more questions, and Sean, I'll start with you, and then Tony Weller, T2, go back to you for a second. But for Sean, looking over your career and all the things you've done, all the missions you've been a part of on fires and whatnot, what's the most memorable thing that you recall being a part of, either a mission or an overall incident?
Yeah, like I said, that's a really tough one because I've just enjoyed so many jobs. I've some of the fisheries work that I did, like I said, I loved it because it was literally, when you work all summer long, and that 5-6 months of your summer is your money making, your bread time, and you just worked, and you can go out for 10 or 14 days with a fisheries crew and just cast a rod and hang out and light fires on the beach. Those are the times that I remember. I said it's a lot easier for me to say, that time that I sat in that swamp and was getting eaten by bugs, I freaking hate that one. But all the other times were just great, So, I really enjoyed the firework, actually, to be honest. When I ran a base in Vanderhoof there for a number of years, it's a really small district, a really tight knit group of firefighters, a tight knit group of industry that worked really well with firefighters, some really old firefighters. So I had, as a younger sort of pilot in those days, had a great mentorship in that. They just really knew how to fight fires. And you go out with an IA crew, and that's probably some of the better times for sure, is going out with that IA crew and being that helicopter pilot. You kind of like to be alone, or at least I always did. And you go with that one crew and you hit a fire, and maybe you go hit a second one or something like that, and that's what you're doing. Those are the fun times for sure. And definitely some of the other wildlife work I've done. Love some of those tree planters, a bit crazy, but throwing trees at the ground has always been good.
Yeah. Any emergencies?
To be honest, knock on wood, so far I've not done my career, but I've been fortunate that I haven't had any serious mechanical issues. I've had a few instances over my career, heli skiing one time, grazed a snowbank with a blade and caused a bit of damage, but a few broken windows over the years, landing on stumps or something stupid like that. And I always found it was either when I was trying to do too good of a job for the customer or rushing things. So over the career, I learned that, you can walk that extra 500 meters. I don't need to get you in that little tiny hole. Even if Bob did it last time for you, I ain't doing it. I don't really care. I would also help them pack their bags at 500 meters or whatever it might be, right? Like, I'm not a jerk. I'm just not into praying in my aircraft anymore.
Yeah. Well, it's good. I mean, it's good to know your limit too. Just because one other pilot is willing to do something, that's probably the most dangerous situation, because you may not be willing to do that, or your skills just may not be up to that same par. I've experienced that for sure.
Yep. I had a memorable experience, probably one, had a forestry fellow that was doing some work in silviculture, and kind of new to the area. And in the previous couple of years, I'd worked with another outfit that had really got it dialed in. They said, pick us up at 2:00. They're at 1:30 waiting for you, right? Kind of thing. And so this fella started the job, and, a few miles back, he wants to get into one spot, and I can see it for a few miles back. I ain't getting in there. And I said, it looks pretty tight. And he goes, oh, don't worry, I'll find you a spot. I'm like, oh, you'll find me a spot. Okay, let's see how this goes. So yes, we flew around that block for a good 15 minutes. And before I kind of, the people in the back were some young kids as helpers. And I just asked them, hey, you guys take your headsets off back there? And they kind of look at me and put their headsets down, and kind of lit into the fella. I said, look, you've been trying to kill me for 20 minutes. If I was any younger, I might have tried some of this stuff. If it was any lower time, I might have actually tried some of those things that you did and you asked me to try, but I'm smarter than that. And if you just listened to me 15 minutes ago, I would have had you on the gravel bar down below, and you would have a 50-meter walk up the hill, and you would have been working already. And I wasn't trying. But I tell you, the rest of the job after that went just fine. There was never any pushing after that. And the pilots that I put on it, they never had any problem with them. But some people just don't know they're doing that, right? And just had to be reminded that you're pushing the pilot here, and that's not appropriate.
Yeah, I just think that people don't realize the magnitude of it. It's helicopters are awesome until they're not. I've always kind of said that. And, unfortunately, they can not be awesome when you put yourself in that position. And I think if you're not in a helicopter all the time, it's not your mindset. It's like, it's almost like this magic carpet that can do anything. And you as a pilot have to set the precedence of like, well, no, actually, we have limitations. In fact, we have a lot of limitations. And so I think
some of the worst ones are the more experienced passengers that have been through it all. And they, I've even been told one time, oh, that guy you're taking out today, he probably has more hours in the helicopter than you do. And I finally got to a point where I just said, you know what, he can take the keys in and go fly it himself, because I don't need to then if he's that experienced. And I find those are the ones that will probably tend to, not duck when they walk away, maybe potentially walk around the back or do something silly because they just think they know what they're doing. Or in this case, like I said earlier, just kind of pressure. I've been in this spot before, but no, you actually haven't. You're probably in a Hughes 500 when you landed in that spot, and this Bell 206 ain't fitting in that spot. So yeah, it's precarious sometimes, but you are the PIC at the end of the day, and I think that's one thing again I've loved about helicopters is right out of the gate. I wasn't a Kojo. I was flying an R-22 around the Arctic of Canada with a bird hanging off me at 100 feet below me and towing it along 200 feet, and right out of the gate, no GPS, and just flying around the Arctic and looking at lakes, and that's been pretty much the whole career ever since. I don't think I could do a two crew cockpit. That's for sure.
No.
Well, Tony Weller, I want to thank you guys, AEM, for being a part of this, for making this conversation possible, for your support with Vertical Helicasts and all our individual podcasts. I just also want to thank you for your guys' approach to special missions. You guys, dedicate your business to making what we do easier, more efficient, and better. So thank you for that. On that, can you just kind of touch on why you guys spend so much time in the special mission market and kind of why it's important to you guys?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's part of it is the history of AEM and kind of where we came from. For those who don't know, we kind of came out of what was left of Northern Airborne Technologies after that organization was closed down here in Kelowna, and that was just the kind of the culture of the organization. They'd always worked on these kinds of products and systems. And that's right through from the manufacturing team all the way up to our engineering and technical specialists. There's a lot of people who kind of walked the footsteps ahead of us there that we picked the load up and carried on with. And then you build relationships and a reputation within the industry with certain with your customers, and I think that that's what kind of drives us to keep moving forward. And we work on some pretty cool stuff that goes in fantastic aircraft that are used by just some outstanding men and women around the world, and we take that very seriously. Sean was mentioning there, that high hour passenger who all of a sudden becomes complacent, right? Because they've spent so much time around helicopters, and next thing you know, the guy's walking towards a tail rotor because he thinks he knows what's going on. That's something for us is where we try really hard not to be complacent, because you need to have your wits about you, even on our end as a design and manufacturer, because it's our product that's going on the aircraft, and it's going in to do a very special role or type of action on that airframe for the operator. And we need to make sure that we have that same duty of care that your avionics technician or your mechanic is putting on the aircraft, that your pilot in charge is he's kind of operating the mission, your tactical flight officer is there monitoring all their equipment and giving instructions to the team on the ground. Like we're all part of that team together. And I think that really resonates within our organization. We're an organization that hires for attitude as well. It's really important for us. And our people get a real kick out of seeing success or hearing the stories about, when one of our products has contributed towards some kind of life-saving or successful mission. It's pretty apparent oftentimes on the loudspeaker system side, because that's something that you can see and hear from the ground. But I know we're going there with the radios as well, because we're going to see those aircraft operating firsthand here in Kelowna, and fires are newsworthy events, and we'll know that things are going well for us because we'll get the feedback from our customers as well. So
yeah, it always kind of blows me away when you think about the number of people that it takes to make a successful mission possible. It's not the two folks in the law enforcement perspective. It's not the two folks in the aircraft. It's not just the pilot and TFO. It's the team that surrounds that whole aircraft and that mission. And it comes down to R&D and development of products and the things that you guys are doing as part of that team. So it's critical and really cool that you guys are just continuing to push the envelope to develop better products again and make us more efficient and better at what we're doing. So thank you guys for that.
Thank you. 100%. And the big piece for us as well is that customer service, customer support. We're not perfect. We try to be, but we're not. But the thing that matters is when something goes wrong, it's what you do next, right? And that's a big thing that we drive on inside our organization. So when that phone rings, when someone's got a problem, or they just need an improvement or a tweak to their configuration or something like that we're there to help them as quickly as we can to get them back in the air and doing what they need to be doing.
I'll tell you, we're sure excited to get these products in all of our aircraft. It's been a real pain point for us in our radios over the last bunch of years, a mixed bag, and then some that are very difficult to operate and just pain points with them. So getting this into our fleet and these guys have done, Tony and his team there with the radios that we've seen, and it looks like a real nice piece of equipment to operate, as is the other equipment that we've got in our aircraft already from them.
Talk about nice conformity too for having as many aircraft as you guys have. That's always as frustrating to me, going in from one helicopter to the other. In the air medical world, sometimes we had different, VHF, UHF radio, and you're trying to, I don't know how to. I literally have no idea how to work this one. You got to go in and read the manual.
So having a synchronicity in our fleet, and that's been a big part of what we've been looking at over the last bunch of years, standardization in our cockpits. So this is part of it, obviously. And
it's a way of enhancing safety. That's knowing how to operate the equipment inside the cockpit, having that standardization, having the conformity. That again, as Tony and T1 and T2 were saying, I mean, when you're in the thick of it, you want to know what's in your cockpit. You want to know that you can rely on those, your kind of muscle memory of doing what you need to do. So that's really key. That's really cool that you guys are doing that. And, Tony, from your perspective, being a designer and a manufacturer, you guys are doing things to make the industry safer, which is really cool, right? You're a business that's doing things that are important. And I think that's pretty awesome. And I think that's one thing that's awesome about helicopters is we do so many cool things with helicopters that are truly awesome for the infrastructure, fighting fires, utility, whatever it may be. So kudos to AEM and working with Yellowhead and coming up with products that are helping the pilots and the crews become safer.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. We're looking forward to it. It drives us every day. It keeps us doing what we're doing. We're looking forward to it as well.
T1, any closing thoughts or questions before we sign off?
Seeing the radio manufacturer collaborating with the end user, asking them what would be better in this radio for the new one coming out, that's pretty good stuff right there. I'm not saying other radio manufacturers don't do that, but if that happened more often, when you get into the cockpit and you've got your radio set up and they're user friendly and the commonality is across the board, that's pretty good stuff right there. So kudos to both your units for getting together and doing something like that.
Well, thank you guys again. And actually, Halsey, any closing thoughts or questions before sign off?
No, this was fun. I think it's really cool. Sean, thank you for your time. Tony, thanks for coming on. Really neat to hear about your guys' collaboration. And just fun to talk about helicopters. There's something that's just, helicopters are just a little bit cooler north of the border for us. You guys
come on up anytime.
You guys do some cool things. So I'm excited. I would love to actually come up and check out the operation. Any chance to go to Canada, I'm all over it. So anyway, thank you,
summer,
John. Yeah, of course, yeah.
John, you can bring your skis up here. We got a couple local hills. We can get some of the Champagne Okanagan powder.
The one Canadian skiing experience I was in Toronto, or just outside north, in Collingwood. And it was like these escarpments. They're not even like mountains. They're just like these hills. So I'm like, what, this is skiing? Like, you got to drive it for 30 seconds and then you skied out and 10 seconds. You
probably strapped your ice skates on there.
Yes. Seriously. No, just feel lucky to be a part of the conversation. I think conversations like this and innovations like this, like, and the products that you guys are creating at AEM, again, are actually making the industry safer. And I think that's one of the cool things that I get to be involved in and doing the podcast is talking to operators like Sean, talking to manufacturers like you, Tony, and what you guys are doing to influence and support a safer industry, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to get there. And so I think that's really cool. And I feel just lucky to be a part of that conversation. John, thanks for including the helicopter podcast on this one.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. It's always a great collaboration. It's neat to see the mixing of our two audiences. While they're very similar, they're also very different. But always happy to work with Halsey and all you guys. It's been a fun conversation. Hopefully at HAI we'll all be able to have a couple beers. So
that'd be great.
I'll be there.
Yeah, we'll have to
Let's do it.
Us too. We've got a nice booth set up. Obviously, the radio is going to be on display along with everything else. Be happy to catch up with you all down there.
Yeah, we'll
booth number that we can share, Tony.
We do have a booth number, but I can't recall it off the top of my head.
We can maybe throw it in our notes, but check out AEM. Come say hi to John and I as well at the MHM Vertical booth. We're really excited to be at Heli Expo. Excited to meet both of you guys there. And Tony, other places where people can contact you other than trade shows?
Yeah, for sure. We'll be obviously on our website, www.aem-corp.com. You can connect with us there. And then the LinkedIn social media channel is typically the one that we're utilizing. So that's the best place to catch up with us.
Free beer sign too at your booth at HI, weren't you?
Free beer tomorrow.
Yeah, free beer tomorrow. That always helps for sure. Yeah. But no, we'll be at Heli Expo. We'll be at the firefighting conference in Sacramento the next week as well. AEA show at the back end of March. PavCon over in Europe as well. That'll be at the end of May there. So yeah, we're all over the place, and then there's always kind of customer visits and things going on in between there as well.
Thank you all, and again, look forward to seeing you guys coming up for a beer in hand. So cheers.
All right, looking forward to it, guys. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
See you.
Thanks to our sponsor, Anodyne Electronics Manufacturing, a leading manufacturer of trusted special mission avionics for law enforcement, aerial firefighting, and utility operators. Visit www.aem-corp.com and learn how AEM's digital communication and loudspeaker systems, avionics consoles, radios, and specialty audio products can support your most demanding missions.
Thank you again to AEM for sponsoring this episode of the Hangar Z podcast. HAI is a week away from the release of this recording, so be sure to visit AEM at their booth located at booth number 2008. And don't forget to join us at the Vertical booth number 5716 on Wednesday, February 28th from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. to say hello to the Vertical Helicast team, which includes myself, Halsey Scheider of the Helicopter Podcast, and Jason Quinn from the Little Rescue Podcast. Vertical is also partnered with Precision Aviation Group to host a beer party during that time. Our friend K9 Torque will also be there to say hello to her friends. Hope to see y'all there. Cheers.
Time to close up the hangar. Thanks for joining us on the Hangar Z podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts.